We're going to start off this evening with our 2021 budget wrap. I guess some council budget presentations, is that correct?
Yes. Let's see who's up first.
Public art.
Public art.
Thank you very much. Carrie Dixon, I'm treasurer of the Public Arts Commission, and I want to thank you for the opportunity. You have our budget request. We have no change in our request for funding from this current fiscal year for FY21. But FY21 does bring two very significant anniversaries for PAC. PAC was founded on March 26, 1991, so we will have been a commission for 30 years. We are one of the few in the nation, so that is a very important piece for us. In addition, the AOS project with our downtown sculptures will be celebrating 25 years. It is one of the longest running public arts expositions in the United States. And we found that out during some interviews that were done for an article that'll be coming out this spring in the Chambers magazine. So we're really excited about this. So we have, some things that we're looking on planning for FY21, and we think we can do that within a lot of the funding we have. We are planning on continuing our work this year with the GIS offices here within the city, because we're working towards a mapping project for all of the neighborhood art sculptures that will also contain maintenance information on them, as well as acquisition and other pieces. So we can put it all in one database, accessible for the public to see where maps are, where the pieces are, what they are, and for PAC in the city for maintenance and other pieces. And we will continue our outreach as we have done with the various festivals, and we're starting to do outreach with the schools with whether they are STEAM nights that incorporate the arts, or they are simply just arts nights. So that's something that we've started this year, continuing that. Do you have any questions in regard to our budget request for next fiscal year?
Any questions for Carrie? Guess not.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming.
It has been my
Appreciate
pleasure
it.
to serve on PAC for 2.5 terms, and I think, not thankfully, but I will looking forward to having a little free time. So we
Thank you for
appreciate
your
the
service, Carrie.
consideration of our budget for next year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. For the Commission on the Arts, this is a pretty straightforward budget request. This includes requests for annual grant awardees for a variety of organizations, and then some funding that the Commission sets aside for its spring and fall special project grants, which are one-time awards up to $1,000 for unique projects that might come up throughout the year. I don't have much for you tonight. There is a representative from the CODA Commission, Tom Lockhart, who's here, if you have any questions.
Any questions?
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Hi, Deb.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. We're going to talk about the asset recommendations for fiscal year 21. And before we start with that, I would like to recognize one of our city volunteers on asset, Jen Schill. She's out here in the audience. So, and we have 4 other volunteers that I would like to recognize as well, though they aren't able to make it this evening. Mary Beth Galimo, Tim Labinas, Andrea Rich, and Ashley Thompson. They worked very hard this past year, and especially the time frame from September to January, when we're looking at budgets, reading reports, filling in spreadsheets, and talking to agencies about services. So want to thank them for all of their dedication and hard work. There are a few factors that I would like to highlight that we used in going into the process. That was with the city's priorities last August. We did some readjusting to not only prioritize the main three headings of, or main three topics of priorities, but then services and areas under each of those three headings we prioritized. And the feedback from the volunteers was thank you. It was very helpful. It helped guide them in their decision making and made that part of the process a lot smoother for them. We also used data from Clear Impact Scorecard for the first time this year during the work sessions with the volunteers. We were able to see trend lines for the services, and so we hope to keep utilizing that information in a variety of ways, and also get to the point that we're sharing that information with U.S. funders, so you have an idea of what the volunteers are looking at, what the agencies are reporting. So stay tuned for that.
Deb, will that be somewhere accessible to the public? You know?
Possibly. We're looking at there's so much information that United Way is trying to figure out the best way possible to make that available so that it's meaningful and people aren't drawing too many of their own conclusions, but that it's impactful and meaningful. So that is one of the things that we are talking about and trying to figure out the best way to manage that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And then lastly, Central Iowa Community Services, the mental health region, they will continue to be a coordinating partner of Asset, but provided no funding through the process for fiscal year 21. Now, what that means is they will continue contracting with agencies and providing dollars through those contracts, but it's not going to fall through the Asset process. Primary reason for that is most of their contracts are on a fee-for-service basis, and so their dollars have to be available to the agencies to provide whatever needed services there are. And so to be tied to an allocation is really tough for them because their mission and their statute out of legislation is to be able to provide services no matter who's needing the services and what the agency is providing. So tying it to an allocation is just a little more difficult for them to do, but they're still at the table. We're very fortunate for that because other funders in the Asset process are funding mental health services and working with agencies. So we want to have that communication and coordination going forward. As a result, though, of CICS not providing funding through Asset, we did have 3 agencies that didn't submit budgets. And that doesn't mean that they can't re-enter the Asset process at some point in time, but they primarily received their funding from the region, so there was no reason to go through the process this time around.
And who are they? Can you remind
The
me?
agencies, Irely Ball, Mental Health Services, Friendship Arc Homes, and Mainstream Living.
Thank you.
Yep. Funding, the total agency request of all funders for fiscal year 21 was $4,859,069. Total funds available from all funders was $4,535,303. The request of the city, so just the city's funds, was $1,625,097. And that was about a little over 33% of the total agency request. The council authorized the amount of $1,524,850 for fiscal year 21, and that was a 4% increase over fiscal year 20. And the volunteers' recommendations reflect the full allocation of that authorized amount. 93% of the requests from the agencies were funded for fiscal year 21, and that's across all funders.
Do you know how that's varied from prior years, that percentage? I mean, it sounds high to me, but I don't know how it relates. You know how?
I can get that information for you, but it's usually been between that 90 and 95%. Of course, that's dependent upon additional dollars that funders bring into the process, agencies requests, and we had some services that have been discontinued going into fiscal year '21. So that freed up dollars in a sense to be allocated to other services.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will note that childcare is a high priority across all funders, and so there was a very concerted effort amongst the volunteers in making sure funding was available for that service. And then the other point I wanted to make was with the Volunteer Center of Story County, I had sent the mayor and council a memo on January 20th explaining the activity that went in decision-making that went towards the funding for that particular agency and its services. So at this point, I will entertain any questions or comments.
Any questions?
I
Comments?
just have one comment, and that is I continue to be very impressed with the asset review process and the teams that are charged with working through that. And David and I were both at that meeting, the joint funders with John, and I think all of these allocations were explained very well. And I think, if anything, this process is going more smoothly because of that focused prioritization that we have provided.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would, I would echo. I think that this council has opportunity to come to these meetings. These volunteers put in an awful lot of time, and they make an awful lot of decisions. And some people, not necessarily kidding, just indicated how difficult it was to go through the process. But there's untold hours people dedicate to this. And Jen, thank you for your service. I know you put a lot of time into it, take it very seriously. Yes, it's like it's going better with the prioritization, as you mentioned. And also our scorecard is going to be coming or going to start being used as well too. And there's some other evaluations that's going to be done, on that, and to meet the needs of our community as identified. Also, as you're probably aware, the community survey is being conducted. I think, is that a countywide survey? Is that right?
Yes.
So and that will be done, I think, in October. So hopefully that'll be another tool in the tool chest for those in the asset to use and make sure that we're really, on point to help people out as we can. And it's just a remarkable system. And thanks for your efforts on that too, Deb. Any other questions or comments for Deb regarding asset? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your support.
Brian, outside funding requests?
Thank you, Mayor. So this year, the council authorized a 4% increase for the proportion of the outside funding requests that come from local option. There were 6 organizations that requested funding through local option, and 1 that requested funding that we've historically taken out of the hotel motel tax fund. We have reviewed the requests and made recommendations using an internal city staff team to review those requests, and have generated the recommendations that are before you tonight for those 7 organizations. As a reminder, once you place the individual organizations and the funding amounts in the budget, we will then, as city staff, go back and prepare contracts with these agencies that outlines the individual tasks and scopes of services that they will be expected to perform. As they put together their proposals, the organizations are asked to prioritize the tasks that they feel are more important versus less important. And so we use that and go back and forth to come up with a scope of services that is that reflects the dollar amount that they've been allocated. So we'll bring those back to you, and unless you have some specific direction about what you'd like to see in the scopes of services, we'll bring that back to you for approval later in the spring. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about the outside funding requests.
So Brian, I'm curious as to the allocations where we're striving for the 4% sort of across the board, but not really. I mean, it's 4% total, right? And I know we've been trying to focus on being more data-driven as a council. And every year, the Ames Historical Society, actually Ames History Museum, they've rebranded, gives us a lot of data to work with, how they're using the money, how they're increasing their services to us every year. And yet they've come in with one of the lowest amounts for an increase. And on the flip side of that, we have Ames Main Street, which is doing a lot of really good things downtown. But when I look back at the funding requests, it seems like they're actually contracting to do less, but we're giving them more than the 4% increase for the year. So I'm trying to understand that relative balance.
Well, it's important to remember the council direction was 4% increase in the overall amount to be allocated. It wasn't a 4% increase across
No, I
the
know.
board to each agency. So you give us that pot of money and we have to do our best to figure out what's justified. There are some criteria in the process, in the application process that the council has agreed to. I think there are 4 criteria regarding activities that pursue current council goals, the appeal of the activities to the broader community, the uniqueness of it, and there's one other I forget. And this isn't an exact science, so I can speak for the way I evaluate these requests. I can't speak very well for the way the others in the group evaluate the requests. And
Well, and I think this is the first time staff has done this.
we've
on-
always
on
had
your
staff
own.
involved.
But-
Historically, there have been outside
Yeah.
citizens too, and this is the first time that it's been just staff. So this is, it's not an easy process to come to these numbers. I can't say that there's, a matrix or some real clear-cut objective way to do this. So if you're not comfortable with the recommendations, they're simply recommendations. So we're not going to take umbrage if you decide to change those based on what the council's prerogative is.
So I have concerns about this simply because it feels like every year we get the Main Street numbers and they're remarkably imprecise in the way they show up in the grant. So it may be that one year the music walk is going to cost thousands of dollars, and the next year, well, it doesn't seem like it's going to cost that much. And yet the event doesn't really seem to change. So I'm struggling to understand the precision with which those numbers are presented to us, as I struggle every year with that proposal. And I don't know, I guess I just can't reconcile that with the efforts to try and be more data-driven about decision-making. And maybe my council colleagues have some feelings about this.
I mean, we're not necessarily asking for specific detail of breakdown on how much the cost of each event is, so
No, but every year we have a contract for specific events.
certainly, but I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're not getting this is how much X costs and this is how much Y costs and so forth.
Right. So if you think about the way assets requests are evaluated,
Right.
for asset, when agencies request funding, they list an itemized revenue and expense budget for every program that is funded through asset. And so there, we're truly paying for the cost to put on that service. Here, we have, through a lot of back and forth and change over the years, come to a much more slimmed down evaluation process. It's a 2 or 3 page application. It doesn't involve that much detail. And we ask the agencies to tell us, how much do you think it would cost to put on this activity? And they tell us, and if it sounds reasonable, that's what we end up plugging into the contract. We can change that. We can say, no, that doesn't sound reasonable for that particular activity, that service that the city's going to obtain. We can tell them we're going to pay for a different amount for that. But it doesn't involve the level of detail like we might have in an asset process where there are 20 or 30 different categories of revenue and expense.
But we do contract for specific services.
Yes. So, for example, with Ames Main Street, we would contract for certain events at certain dollar amounts. They put on the event, and once the event's over, we write them a check for the dollar amount that we've agreed to.
So one of the issues that I have is that when I look back, and I know you aren't really looking back at these, you're looking at the data that's in the application, right? Which includes a spreadsheet of approximate costs for some things.
Did you notice a discrepancy from year to year then in
In,
cost of an event?
it
You
doesn't,
mentioned our
I don't
walk
think it
or
lists the
walk.
event specifically.
Oh,
That's what I mean. It's not there, but the general description is there, what they're going to provide. And when I look back at that, I think 2 years ago, 2018, we were contracting, or they wanted to contract for 12 events. And the total cost of that with everything else was going to be $54,000. Now we're contracting for 6 events and various other things. And the cost is $60,000, or the request was $60,000. So I'm trying to understand that kind of shift in value of the events.
well, isn't a big chunk of that the beautification increase that they're asking for?
I don't know. Is it?
Well, this year they did request a significant increase in beautification. I think they were intending to use an outside contractor for some of the work, and then also one-time funds for the replacement of some of the promotional materials, banners and things like that that have old
rebranding.
old logos and old branding on them.
So
So that was
was-
an increase from $7,500 last year for that beautification
To 20,000.
service to $20,000.
So was the banner request or the signage part of beautification then? It wasn't part of promotions?
Right. It's part of the $20,000 that they requested for beautification in their proposed budget.
So when I look at it and I see that promotions has gone up to, was it $43,000 from $24,000?
Oh, yeah, where does
Promotions
where
and
does that increase
advertising?
come from, do you mean?
Yeah, I mean, that just seems like a tremendous jump if that's not including the signage, et cetera. So I really don't know how to understand this budget, and that has been troubling to me every year, because I think Main Street does a great job with what we allocate to them. But I want to understand what the money is going for. And it seems like the costs keep shifting, and
Did it go from events maybe to promotion? I mean,
I don't know.
Well,
just brainstorming, but if they have less events,
I would focus less on that budget and more on the tasks that they propose and the dollar amounts that they propose them to be at. That would be my recommendation. And if those seem like those are out of line, then that would be the area we would need to work with them on the contract. I mean, because we've had this before. Organizations have anticipated significantly higher self-generated revenues, right? They're going to do a fundraising campaign or something, and in reality, it comes in much less. That doesn't really matter to us. What we're paying for the product should be what we're focused on. They can anticipate all the increased self-generated revenues they want, but we have nothing to do with that. Our focus is on what we're providing them and what their product is to the community. So I would focus
So-
more on the tasks. and
So the
dollar
increase then is, and we did set aside the part that was for signage, et cetera?
So we have not yet done that part. The dollar amount that is in the summary page on the report is what our committee came to as a bottom line for how much to put in the budget for this organization. And then we will have to go back and negotiate with the organization to identify what that money goes towards. Now, if you have specific direction to us, if you say the signage is not something we're interested in, then that helps us out. We can tell them, nope, zero that out, and we're going to spend our money on other things. Otherwise, we're just going to have to go as staff and make our best guess and come up with a contract that we can present to you and recommend that you approve. You don't have to approve it at that point. You could tell us to go back and modify it. But if you have ideas now or earlier in the process about what you'd like to see in there or not in there for the dollar amount that you're being asked to approve, that would be helpful to know.
And with regard to the lower increase for the History Museum, I know part of their request was for a scanner. $3,000 worth of their request was for a scanner. Did that figure into the discussions about would it cut off their funding or not?
Not specifically. Again, I think what we would do is go through their proposed priorities and look at where that item fell in the list of priorities. If it's to the high end of the priorities, we'll probably incorporate it. We tend not to say this money is for you, organization, to buy a thing. We tend to focus more on this money is for you as an organization to produce a product for the community. And whatever you want to do with that money so that you can produce a product for the community, that's fine. But we don't pay for things like, we're generally not paying for things like utility bills or equipment
Right.
specifically, or conferences for staff or things like that. That's not what this is focused on. If the organizations want to spend or invest in those things, that's great. But our focus in the contract is on what they will do for the community in exchange for the money we give them. So buying a scanner is not a community benefit; it's an internal benefit. Providing a database of the plans for the community, that is a community benefit. We could work with them on that. But we'll have to look at where that falls in the priorities and talk to them about what they would be willing to accept given the dollar amount that we have budgeted versus what they asked for.
Well, so I think council knows that I'm interested in rebalancing the percentages, but I don't know whether there is other discussion about that before I make a motion on it.
Steve and Dwayne, looking at, I think you're interested potentially, Gloria, on honoring the request for 49.5 for the Ames History.
No,
What was it? Were you proposing?
no, it was doing instead of a 3.1% increase, doing a 4.97% increase,
And how much was that?
$2,262.
Okay. So my question is, Steve and Dwayne, is there adequate money to just keep Main Street the way it is and to add a little bit of money to Ames History Society? I think we're talking about $2,600. Is that something that we need to rebalance, or is there money available that we can go ahead and add to it to try and honor the work that the committee did and just basically provide a little more resources for one of these requests? Can you comment on that?
$2,600, you're saying?
It's, my math is slow.
Close to that, yeah.
Um,
In the range.
It's a difference of $847 more.
Okay.
I believe we can handle that.
But
saying
by the
that's
same
the
token,
difference?
is that going to,
Is that going to make a difference?
for the, when we feel like we're working awfully hard for disparity of this amount?
Exactly. That's the point, is that, are we majoring on minors right now? Can we just, if the point is that we want to try and provide a little more funds for something which is really worthwhile in the Ames, History Museum, can that be the option? It's just adding some money to that and leave all the other requests as recommended, as is, as a suggestion, and then let staff, make that final adjustment versus, I know I appreciate you're trying to balance it out. So
I'm trying to balance it out, but I also have a concern that I feel like we are not getting precise numbers from Main
Okay.
Street, and we have not gotten precise numbers from them for a very, very long
Okay.
time.
So that's a different,
So that's To
That's
me,
em-
that
that's
is
embedded in
also
the
an
issue.
issue.
Yep.
And I feel that the 5.8% increase maybe rewards that in a way that is odd, given our focus on data. That's all. So I was going to suggest rebalancing so that
Yep.
Main Street got a 4% increase
Mhm.
and shift the $842 over.
From Main Street.
Yeah.
Is it 4%?
So it's
So I guess the question,
4% is,
so the question I guess would come to is,
What's the new number?
I don't recall from last year if that issue is brought up, and if it was brought up, then the question is maybe we need to do some more follow through and just say the expectation is next year at this time, there's more specificity, and we try and help them understand what we're looking for. So then they know exactly what our
I
expectations
think it's
are.
been brought up for the last probably 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
But of course, last year we had the change in directorship. So there was a
Mhm.
transition period. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. No,
so anyway, my proposal, my
Oh.
motion would have been,
so let's just, any
To
other questions or
rebalance that.
comments on this topic before Gloria moves forward? Okay, go ahead.
so my motion would be to shift the allocation so that the Ames Historical Society, their Ames History Museum gets a 4% increase and Main Street gets a 4.97% increase and Main Street gets a 4% increase.
Can we break that into 2 motions?
Is that the same amount of money then you're saying? I didn't understand the $800.
Yes, yeah,
So
if you
what are you
shift it,
assuming? Why don't you just, so how much money do you want to add and how much you want to subtract?
I guess it'd be $847 if I did my math correctly.
847 more to the Ames History Museum?
Yep.
And then subtract 847 from the Ames Main Street recommendation?
I guess.
So first of all, is there a second to the motion?
A second, though, we did have a request to split that into 2 motions, so I don't know, Gloria, if you want to.
Yes, the motion's been seconded.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm-
so discussion. Go ahead.
So
If you want to keep it all one motion, that's fine. 2, Amber asked.
I
Are you
will vote
proposing it?
differently depending on whether it's 1 motion or 2, so.
Let's see if they say.
So I would not have a problem with putting that into 2 motions.
Okay, I'll withdraw and
So I'll withdraw the motion I made.
Okay.
And my first motion would be that we increase the Ames Historical Society or Ames History Museum allocation by $847
Second.
or whatever I guess, yeah, 847.
So that'll bring it to 46,359? Is that what you're saying?
no, it would be 46,927 plus the 847. Is that correct, Gloria?
Oh.
The recommendation
it
is
should be
46,927.
47,7.
Oh, in addition to, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, 47 what?
$47,774,
I'm sorry, was there a second on that?
which
Yeah.
is
I'm sorry, what did you say?
$47,774.
Okay.
I think I did the math correctly.
Whatever gets them to a 4% increase.
4.97.
All right, discussion?
Let me just chime in that, I've been here for the past couple of years and I sort of remember our conversations along these lines, but not perfectly. And I don't feel like I'm really prepared to share the conclusions about whether precision has been adequate or not from Ames Main Street. It's something that, might be true, but I just,
So this motion is just about the Historical Society.
yes. And so I'm explaining sort of what's going to happen here. And in a larger sense, I'm uncomfortable getting too involved with the recommendation process because I feel like if I'm going to be involved in that, then I really want to study it in a way that I haven't so far. I just don't feel qualified to make these calls. So I'm going to vote against changes generally. It's something maybe we can modify in the next years, but I'm not prepared to do it right now.
All right. Since it has to do with money, let's do roll call.
Aye.
Nay.
Nay. Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
3-3. Motion failed. Okay,
So I won't bother with the second motion then, because I don't think it will pass.
okay. All right. Any other questions for Brian regarding the outside funding?
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Brian. All right, other requests? None?
Not
Okay.
any other reports we have to give. No, do we?
David?
Yes,
The request, we just had that one that was.
I thought the
attached on
auditorium
special
funding might fall
reports
into the other
from-
request category.
Yeah, so where do you want it?
Well,
We're gonna
that'll be handled under
That's up
the
to
budget.
them
You
if
know,
they-
We can do it then.
the
during the
2021
amendments.
budget, because it'll affect the rate.
Okay.
no requests that they don't already have. That would just be if there's somebody here. But
Unless you want public input on that.
Yeah, but just make sure we get, is there anything else that fall underneath this category of conversation before we move on to public input?
no.
Okay, moving on to item 2, I'm going to open up public input on capital improvement projects, our plan, and the budget. So if anyone who's going to address council, I ask you to do so on these topics only. And limit your comments, please, to 3 minutes or less.
Good evening, citizens. I have a question concerning the Ames Citizens Institute as opposed to the Citizens Academy that was in existence several years ago. It seems to me, when I heard Brian make that presentation the other night, it sounded like it was basically the same thing to get citizens involved in the citizens. And I remember trying to apply for the Citizens Academy several years ago because people ask me, I'm opening the door for people, who do they talk to when in the thing? And it seemed like I would be a better service if I went to something like that than if I didn't. And I remember talking with Susan Guasada and Lieutenant Spencer, who basically refused my request to be part of their academy, and they put me on hold for a year, and they didn't even have it the next year. And it's my understanding that it's a different group that's doing. I don't know. I kind of feel like, is it the same? I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I want to talk about, people ask me, how does the citizen city work? And I open the door for people, and it's like, I don't know who to talk. People talk to me about potholes on the street, and people complain to me about things that the police department does and the jury does, and it's like, I can't help them. I don't know that I want to be part of it, considering what some of the things that Spencer said to me in private, that day a couple of years ago. It just, you're being public nuisance number one for getting the door for people.
Richard, I would ask you to you could talk to maybe. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, I'll close public input. Move on to item 3, final council decisions.
Okay, we'll walk you through some decision-making issues for you. First, we want to start with the capital improvements plan. You have a recommendation before you for the next 5 years of major projects facing the city of Ames. We have a balance, kind of balanced it out with projected revenue to support the expenditures reflected in this. If you'd like to add a project or delete a project before you make a motion to approve it, that would be appropriate.
Okay. One of the ones that staff passed out to us was the plaza. As a separate sheet, we would need a motion regarding adding that. Is that correct?
Yeah, if you'd like to add this, I want to point out to expedite this, to actually have the funding available to do the conceptual design work. The 200,000 was not available when I prepared this budget. So you'll see later on, we found money. You'll take an action to remove $200,000 from a project in the 1920 budget that was carried forward to do a parking lot at River Valley North. But remember, we've delayed that project because we're waiting for a water line to be constructed all the way up into our new well field. We don't want to construct that paving and then have it ripped up. So we'll replace it. We'll remove that, which will free up $200,000 that will move forward to pay for the design.
So do you need the motion both on adding this sheet and that?
No, we'll do that later. I was just pointing out when we do the amendment, we'll get to that. You'll know what that is.
So now you need the motion though.
All you need is the motion for this, to add this particular project in the CIP, Downtown Plaza.
And Steve, the 1.1 million is already in the general fund.
The 1.1 is, I had 400,000 built in last year. We increased that from the available balance in the general fund this year. And hopefully at this time next year, I'm showing general obligation bonds in the tune of another 1.4 million. Hopefully that will be reduced if we have any other general fund savings. So it might change a little bit for next year too.
So with respect to a motion, is it adequate to move to adopt the plan as presented and included on this plaza project status? Is that correct?
Downtown Plaza, the new project, yes. It totals $2.7 million.
And do you need that in the motion or
I
not?
think so. Just want to make sure you're referring.
And do you need to have us determine or include in the motion the source of the different funds, general fund?
No, by adopting it, I think you're adopting this page.
Okay. Very good.
So I would move that we add the Downtown Plaza project to the CIP with a budget of 2.7 million as presented in the staff worksheet.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Discussion?
Just as a reminder, did we contemplate having a public restroom as part of the Downtown Plaza?
We have not contemplated anything yet. The actual features will be finalized after public input. So I'm assuming you want us to explore that possibility, but we're going to get a variety of costs for spray pools and skating rinks, and probably will take your final decision after you see the final budget. So
As long as you're thinking about it, the list of possible attributes of the plaza did not include it. So I just want to make sure
would you
that
like us to add that perhaps?
if
As a
you would
split it?
accept a friendly amendment, somehow we need to provide a public restroom down here. We invite thousands of people here. So would you accept a friendly
Yeah.
amendment on that?
And that would be part and parcel of plaza.
Well,
It would be one
Well,
of the things they investigate.
Yeah,
Yeah,
part
it's
of
nothing's
the-
for sure
yeah.
yet. I
Nothing's
just
for
would like
sure.
to have it as
But
an
I
item
think
for
you-
consideration.
Yeah.
we can add that certainly.
Are you amenable to the friendly amendment?
It was her.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Oh, the second.
You can add that.
And
Yep, we can add anything.
we did talk about this, and I think the discussion was the restroom, instead of being a standalone someplace else, would potentially be located in this plaza concept. Is that what is that what you're intending?
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense to consider that.
Correct. Okay.
If they don't, then we can find somewhere else.
I just want to make sure that there wasn't a confusion in terms of saying that it could be a Tom Evans Plaza or someplace else, that the friendly amendment is basically to consider that as a part of this project.
Correct.
Thank you. All right. Any further comments or questions? All right, roll call.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
It won't be.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other amendments to the 2020 to 2025 CIP?
Just the plan.
Okay, hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the 2020 to 2025 CIP as amended.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, moving on to item 3C, amendments to FY 1920 adjusted budget.
Okay, we like to start off with some changes that we wanted. We kind of confused you maybe a little bit last time on the increase in revenue. So we'll see if finance has got this down for you. We want to make some amendments to what's in our budget. So see if this helps.
Yeah, see if this goes better at 6 o'clock than it did at 9 o'clock after 4 hours of going through the budget. So I'm just going to hit some of the items that are on the list that impact the fund sheets. And these, we already have the pages included in the budget that reflect these changes. But the first one is on the water utility. And you can see side by side, we have the 2 pages, and this is one where we mentioned where the sum total of the changes brings up the ending balance by about $6 million. And this change took a project of $6,078,000 for water supplies expansion, moved it from being funded out of the water fund to be funded by the state revolving fund or bond proceeds. So originally we showed it being taken out of water. If we move to a different place, I'll show you that in a minute. So when we take that out, that reduces the expenses up here. You see that change over here, and that carries all through and ends up increasing the balance from an ending balance of a little over 3 million to a little over 9 million. So that page is included with that change. Now you kind of see the other side of that. This is the Water Construction Fund, and this is the fund that we use to account for the things that are funded by bonds that pass through this fund. So when you think about it, big picture wise, bond funds come in, a project gets done, and it should net out to zero. And obviously we didn't have all the revenue in here, so we needed to bring in the matching revenue for SRF in the 1920 adjusted. We have that state revolving fund revenue coming in here. You can see that change. So that was the moving of the North River Valley Wellfield project. So that was in the current year. And then over here in the recommended year, that's that 6078 project. So SRF is simply matching. So we don't do the project unless we have the proceeds. So we have all these in here to match right now.
Should not be a negative balance.
Should not be a negative.
Revenue should
right.
equal expenditures
Right.
in the construction.
So it's a little bit different than general obligation bonds where we just issue the bonds, we have the proceeds, and it kind of move back and forth. This is reimbursable. So we do the project, we spend the money, the cash comes in, so it always balances out. So that now reflects that. This page here on the right is included in the budget. Reflects those changes. It's all in the CIP. It's now in the budget book. Next one is sewer, and this is similar situation. This is a sewer improvement fund, not the regular sewer fund that reflects the operations. This was to record state revolving fund revenue coming in for projects, and in both the adjusted year and the recommended year, so those zero out. The same situation as water. Next one is stormwater. Similar situation, stormwater improvements. So this is to reflect the receipt of SRF, and also we had a federal grant. And those two amounts are up here. Very similar situation. We reflect the receipt of SRF revenue. There's a higher amount. And then the state grants, that was the river flooding project that's that you've seen, and that's pretty recent.
That was the good news. That came
Yeah, that's a
after we put the
good news
project together.
change.
$3.7 million. Remember, for the bank restoration project, it's going to lower flooding in South Top.
And grant works similar to SRF, only, we don't have to pay that one back. So that comes in, the revenue matches the project, so that improvement fund zeroes out. This page on the right is included in the budget book. It matches what's in the CIP that you had in front of you. And then on the summary pages, all those changes that we made previously carry through and are on this summary page. So that's all reflected in here. I won't spend the time to go through all the changes, but those just move ahead into this page. So that's all included, will be included as changes to the book. Nancy's already made all those changes, and they weren't in your draft that went to you, but it'll be updated and included.
So Dwayne's trying to talk about the adjustments to the amendment to the adjusted budget plus the next year's budget. Basically, the SRF revenue was left out. It caught our attention when you had negative balances there. It shouldn't have been there.
So
and then the grant came afterwards, so we didn't capture that.
then we'll go through one by one and ask you to approve those changes as we go through. But we wanted to show them to you kind of side by side so you could see it all wrapped together rather than just one at a time.
Okay, any questions for Dwayne or Steve on this one?
Can we just make a motion to adopt these three recommendations as listed on our sheet here? Would that
Actually,
be
you
okay?
I should read them in. We have to,
Yeah.
each one has to be voted on.
want to do the first three? Yes. First three?
Yeah, 1, 2, and 3 with, yes. I mean, would that work for you? Is that enough direction?
Yeah. So it'd be D, 1, 2, and 3.
No, it'll be
No.
C,
C,
I mean,
one,
C,
two,
1, 2, and
three.
3, and then we'll do D later.
Yeah, D is the other side.
Okay, sounds good. I move that we approve the amendments recommended in C 1, 2, and 3.
Second.
This is what they.
Okay.
I got the wrong one.
And you have a copy of that down there? Yeah, I can give you mine. That's what All right. All right, move to second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Aye.
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 Okay, item 4, any other amendments to the adjusted budget?
So Steve has recommended that I make my motion to add the small arts grant pilot program for $10,000 as an amendment to the fiscal year 2019-2020 adjusted budget. So I would move that we do that.
I'll second.
All right, moved and seconded. Go ahead.
If you do this, I would suggest the reason I'm recommending it, it comes out of the council contingency fund. We carry forward that if you look on that page 199, I think it is, there's $118,000 we're moving forward. You have obligated most of that, but there is $38,471 left for the rest of this fiscal year out of your council contingency. Then it starts over July 1st for another 50. So we can certainly pay for the $10,000 out of that 38,000 remains. And if you cannot accomplish it, which is going to be pressed to get all your criteria done and approved, we can still carry that forward to the next year. If you choose to do this.
Good.
What did you call that, your program?
It's the Small Art Grant Program, or SMART Grant for short.
Does it have to have that name?
I just came up with it. It is perfectly fine for the committee who develops the grant guidelines to make a recommendation for calling it something else.
Okay.
I think it's good. I mean, if we've got it in contingency and it wouldn't otherwise, it's not otherwise money we'd be spending. I mean, I do think it meets the goal, maybe goal is not the right word, the value we set of making games fun and vibrant. And I think art goes a long way towards that. So.
And it's also designed to support individual artists as opposed to arts organizations, which are covered by CODA. And it may be a means of getting more artists involved in what's happening in the community. And I would say we leave the guidelines up to the commission, probably the Public Art Commission, to develop in the future.
Okay. Roll call.
Well, Mayor, if I could just, I much as I love the idea of this, I think it's going to be difficult in principle. When we had the town hall meeting on the budget, this was not something that people asked for. I would rather put more money towards auditorium relief because that's what the arts community expressed us. And I'm apprehensive about the criteria. It's very difficult in this age to come up with criteria that we're not going to make someone unhappy with respect to the way in which these things are administered. So I think we should keep the budget as tight as we can. And I love theater, I love arts, but I have trouble supporting this.
We took that out of this. Other comments? Roll call, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any other amendments?
We'll need you to remove $200,000 from the local option tax fund.
Council contingency.
Pardon me?
Did you say?
No.
What was this? Oh,
That's
different.
separate.
Different.
We approved that at council contingency,
Yeah.
at 10,000. But I want to go on record that you're removing the 200,000 in the local option tax fund that was being carried over in 1920. That was earmarked for the North River Valley parking lot.
Yeah.
Or that will free up the money that will pay for the 200,000 next year of the design of the plaza. So we need your concurrence, a motion to remove that.
What specifically, so let's get a specific motion. What do you want
I
to,
would move that we
Motion.
transfer
This would- no,
200,
just- It's what you
Remove?
want to do is motion to eliminate $200,000 from the local option
Option
sales
sales
tax
tax.
funds that were earmarked in 1920 for the North River Valley parking lot.
so moved.
there's second, moving second, discussion? This money is going to be used for the,
Plaza.
Actually,
The
it goes
plaza.
away and therefore will, to get complicated, drops in the available balance.
Mhm.
We reallocate, you're reallocating next year
Right.
for the design of the plaza in
Very
2021.
very good.
You have to eliminate this to free it up to make it available.
Discussion? Roll call.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Is this, so I don't have a suggested
yeah.
change, but I did have a
Got a hold.
something I just wanted to note. Steve, this is where you had the list of the projects that we could add yet in 1920, where you had one-time funding available for a number of things, which included like the climate action plan and the, one thing I had mentioned earlier, and I'm not going to do it this year, but it's just something I would think about for future. I kind of wanted to mention just sort of as a heads up or a warning, was that there was, I think, about $30,000 that we're going to give the library out of that one-time money for some renovations to their doors. And I had wondered during the fund summary review why we weren't using future library needs money for that, since they have about 180,000 available in that fund. And again, it's not something I want to do this year, but in future years, if we're looking for a project to fund and something like that is in there, that's something where I probably would move that comes out of the library fund, and we use that 30,000. I mean, I'm not saying it'd be the same amount
Understood.
next year, but what we would use that funding maybe for another type of exciting project we like. So I just wanted to mention that as a heads up, as something I was thinking about, not for this year, but moving forward.
I think that's fair. Why aren't we doing that?
I think it might come as a surprise to the library this year if we were to do something like that.
We have a
Steve,
new
you-
director. Maybe I could work with her on that so that for the expectations. She wasn't as familiar with the balances and the donations and planning how she wants to use the money. So it'll allow us time to have some discussions with that.
Yeah.
Expectations will be delivered to her for next year.
Yeah, I had thought about it for this year, but we didn't have another burning project that
Needed.
that we knew and needed to be funded. And also Steve mentioned it might be nice to give them a heads up. So
Oh, that sounds good.
Okay. Anything else? Anything else, Steve, Dwayne, on this category before we move on to motion to approve adjusted budget?
Is that right? We got it all?
Yeah, no other amendments. We have to specifically include transfers.
Okay. So that's in the motion, isn't it?
Yeah.
In the motion, let's make sure it's clear that you're approving as amended, including the interfund transfers. We need that on the record, just as it's written in the italicized language.
On items C1, 2, and 3?
No, on D.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I would vote that move to approve the adjusted budget for fiscal year 1920 as amended, including the interfund transfers.
Second.
Okay. Discussion? Roll call.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
aye.
Aye.
You just spent a lot of money.
All right. Amendments to propose FY 2020-21 budget.
So can we
Do
move
those first
1,
three.
2, 3, and 4? Or can we move all of them?
Yeah, yes.
Can we move all of them?
Mhm.
Okay, so I would move
Items 1 through 9.
No.
1 through 9. Yeah, so I would move items 1 through 9 for the amendments to the proposed FY 2021 budget.
Was it all at one?
Second.
Could just, record show it'll be E1 through 9. That's what she's referring to.
Everything?
Discussion.
It's everything.
Okay, hearing none, roll call.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, decisions regarding other outside funding requests?
We have the issue of the parking funding that we'll take up later in the regular meeting. But I think that if we want to put anything towards that this year, we need to put it in the budget now.
That's correct.
So as you'll recall, Brian reached out to Ames Main Street and Campus Action Association and got a list of the total dollar amount that they would be planning for parking in the upcoming year, and that's this $5,737.50. We're changing this parking policy right now, and it doesn't really line up with the fiscal year. And so I think that this year we should just move ahead and approve this funding so that we can take it up with the outside funding requests for next fiscal year in the fall and look at it more closely then. So I would move to add the $5,737.50.
Why don't you just round about 5738?
I would
57.38.
move to add 5738 from the local option sales tax fund, right?
Actually, if you turn on page 253, let me indulge you for 1 second. 253.
In the budget.
Yep. This is going to be a little bit different. What we're recommending is we don't allocate it to the actual agency itself.
Right.
What we want to do is you look on the top of 253, or what's known as transfers. So what we'll have there is we'll have a transfer out from the local option fund. We'll show it to the parking fund in the amount of the 5738. Now, each time, probably the downtown and Campustown group, Main Street Campustown group will still come before you for a lot of approvals. At that time, we will remind you that a transfer, if you approve the overall project, a transfer will have to be made at that time out of this budgeted transfer. Okay, each time you do it, you'll authorize the transfer out. We'll put the total amount of 5738 here to transfer out. It will be moved out each time you approve the event from the local option to reimburse the parking fund. And that way we don't cut a check to the agent to downtown and they cut a check back to us.
So if we simply move to approve the transfer from local option to the parking fund,
You want to appropriate 5738 as a transfer to the parking fund.
then you'll take care of the rest, is what you're saying,
Yes.
throughout the year.
But we want to make sure you're doing it to reimburse the parking fund for the special events, approved special events in the downtown area.
So I would move to appropriate 5738 as a transfer from the local option sales tax to the parking fund for the approved special events.
Second.
Campustown downtown, right? Is
Yeah,
it?
for Campustown downtown.
Second.
Yeah, this
Right.
is in 2021.
Moved and second, discussion?
So Steve, will this become then a reoccurring line item that we'll see in the future?
That's a policy decision of the city council. This is the first time you've done this. So you're going to have to decide if you're going to stick with this policy, change it. Are you going to count this amount towards the request from downtown and Campustown, or is this in addition to their normal request? There's policy decisions that have to be made yet on that,
So,
correct?
And we'll take that up in item 18 later today, I think.
so just to put a placeholder in this, the way in which we're treating the local option sales tax is unsustainable. And it's going to adversely impact a lot of important things that this community values at some point if we don't make a concerted effort to have a very grown-up conversation about how we're handling local option sales tax. So we've been increasing our drawing down of this fund faster than the fund is growing. I'm going to support this motion, but I want to just keep reinforcing this. And I don't know, Steve, at some point, if this can be something that you would direct to create a place for us at some point in our agenda in the year to have perhaps a workshop or a broader conversation, because this is so much to unpack. We're so used to spending money this way that's going to change. It's going to cause us to really think through if we shift some of these line items to general property taxes, but that would be a big shift for us.
That's right. I would like to discuss that with you. I don't think we need to do it now. I think probably in November of next year. I want to do it in advance of the budget, but I hope we get a little more information on our receipts. I'm always optimistic that, again, maybe with the internet sales, we're just seeing the surface of the increase, of what we're going to receive from local option sales tax. So I think it's a proper time if we can wait till November, well in advance you make any decisions. We ask you to make any decisions about allocating those funds, and we'll have more up-to-date information for you. I'll have a better idea of what the fund's going to look like.
Is that something we need to specifically ask you to do, or is that something you can just do as part of the budget
I think
process?
I'll do that as part of the budget process.
When,
Dwayne and Nancy will remind me.
when are the requests from outside agencies such as Ames Main Street due to staff?
October usually.
I'm sorry.
When are the requests from the
Oh, the
different
outside
agencies?
Brian,
November.
Brian, when do you require the requested?
We have the requests due by November 15th every year. We send a notice out to the agencies that requested money the year prior, probably about a month or 6 weeks in advance of that. So
We don't know.
early to mid-October.
So I might just suggest
November.
that this conversation around policy occur sometime in late September or early October, because if it's going to be impacting the requests from the agencies, if all of a sudden we're going to be expecting that to be part and parcel of their request, they need to know that well in advance before they go ahead and tender their request. I hate
As a
that-
policy.
Yeah, as
I
a
probably won't have the
policy.
updated information as much as I like as far as the status of the fund, but we can start that discussion.
If you're going to alter the criteria for the outside funding request program, then we would need to know that in advance of October so that we can make modifications to the instructions.
So, yeah, that's my point, is we
Yeah.
want to give it adequate advance if council decides they want to go ahead and change that policy. So if you would just go ahead and make sure that we get that on the agenda
Earlier.
in a proper time, so they have opportunity to discuss it, get it set before they start doing their budgets.
Yes.
All right. Any further discussion on this item? Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. Any other motions regarding outside funding requests?
Well, we have the auditorium funding issue. I think this is the right place for that, right, Steve?
Yes.
So if you'll recall, council asked staff to research ways that the auditorium could be made more affordable for nonprofit arts organizations back in December. And we recently received the memo on this. So I like some of the ideas here. I think it would, given the history of the auditorium and the degree to which the community really benefits from its use, I think that we should provide a discount against the current rates for nonprofit arts events. So just to put something on the table, I would move to adjust the budget to represent a 30% discount for nonprofit arts groups. So this corresponds to option 2 on the memo in the amount of $12,936. So it's both community arts and the ISU community arts events as well.
Now, just for clarification.
Is there a second?
Oh,
Second.
All right, Junk, second in.
Sorry. For clarification, that includes both the community arts groups plus it said ISU there. I think he's
Yeah.
got to clarify that for you so you understand. That's just not any group from ISU, so it's the.
Yes, so please.
Yeah, it would be anything that would qualify as an arts group.
Okay.
Because there are some ISU, for ceremonies, graduations, things of that sort, that would not be considered an arts group. So, and we would have some criteria that say, yes, this is an arts group, and you would get that discount.
And the auditorium has a list somehow or publicizes somehow the events that are happening, isn't that?
Correct.
So I just want to make sure that these arts events that we're giving discount for are actually known to the community. People can show up and benefit from them.
Yep, we do.
So just to give you some information, if I could, before you vote on it.
Yeah.
So my recommendation would be, I don't think you take this out of a one-time balance. So I'm asking you to, we will be short revenue if we do this because we've built in the higher rate, 100% of the rate. So your question to me would be, what will we have to raise the property taxes to generate $12,936? And it's very small. It's an additional 0.00416 of a cent. So what that will do is, just to give you an idea, right now, the recommendation I have before you has a rate of $10, 14265. Remember that point? 14265. It will then, with this, if you approve it, will go to $10.14681. So 14265 to 10.1468.
So less than a penny.
It's a negligible difference.
Less than half
I
a
would
cent.
characterize it that way. But we have to make the change. We round, obviously, not to.
So if we approve this motion, is that something you would just do it that way, is what you're saying?
Show them, do you have to show them exactly how it works?
That's how they do it.
Yeah, it's less than half a cent. It will increase that rate.
That's, okay.
We'll change, when you get to your minimum levy resolution, I'll change that and pull that sheet
We'll have
up
to
there.
adjust
So you'll have to vote on that part of it additionally tonight.
Other questions or comments on this item?
So could you clarify, so the 30% reduction, that's 30% off of what? Is it off of the projected increases?
It's off the rate that was built in the budget. And,
Yes,
we're-
so this
That we're
was,
otherwise approving.
yeah, so this was for 2021.
Correct.
A 30% discount for the groups that are buying space.
Right. And so would they still have increases or would they have a decrease?
Each of these groups,
Yes.
Oh, because we're increasing, you mean,
You mean, do they experience a net increase this year
Correct.
with this incorporated?
Correct.
I see.
so most of the arts groups will see a decrease, all right? The two that will see some decrease, okay, but maybe not as much as the others, would be Story Theater and Commotion Dance. Okay, because right now, that was explained in the staff memo, they have this extended use rate, which is a really good deal. So what this would do with option 2, when you approve this, there would be no longer an extended use rate. So they would be charged hourly, okay, just like everybody else. So their fees would go up, and then with that 30% decrease, it would get them close to what it's not what they're paying now, all right? It would get them, it would get them close to what they're paying right now, all right, for rental fees. Okay. But it might be just a little bit higher, and it just depends on what they are doing for Story Theater and Commotion Dance.
How many hours? You mean?
Yes.
I just want to make sure we're clear about the impact.
They were facing a major increase there.
Yes, yeah. And for those two groups, the best option, for them, would be option 1, is to keep that extended use rate. But with this, so just for example, so 2021 Story Theater, they would be paying $15,393 for rental fees with the new fees. All right. If you give them a 30% discount off of that, that's roughly $4,500, maybe a little bit more, $4,500. So that would take them back down to just a little bit under $11,000. Right now they're paying $10,434. So they might have a 500, 600. Again, this is just rental fees. Is what this is, because they do pay if they ask for additional staff or so on. That's on top of the rental fees, and that was kind of highlighted in the memo.
Okay.
Other questions? All right, roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. Any other?
Yes. And now we have to come back fiscal year 2021. And I need a motion to add $200,000 in local option sales tax to fund the design work for the downtown plaza project.
So moved.
Second.
Shows an expenditure now.
Yeah.
Discussion?
Yeah, I think so.
Makes sense.
Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
You went ahead and voted, you hit voted on the 1 through 10, right? That-
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
One
one-
through
No,
nine.
1 through 9.
1 through 9.
I mean, 1 through 9. Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay, do we have anything else? we need?
We did not do that.
Which one?
Don't set that hearing yet.
You gotta do the maximum levy now.
You can do the max. Oh, approve the budget as amended. You're not really approving it. You're just approving the changes.
For 2021?
Yes.
Okay, we do motion then?
So I would move that we approve the proposed budget for fiscal year 2021 as amended, including the interfund transfers.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Aye.
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 Now the-
Aye. Aye.
in the max.
Aye.
Yeah. I can maybe do that.
Okay. Next item then would be public hearing. That correct, Steve? Anything else you need before we go on to setting those last two motions? Items G and H.
No, I think you're ready to set the public hearing.
Okay,
So there'll be a change because of the change with the auditorium. So there was a couple changes to the Iowa code, and part of it was in the administrative code, and that's why we asked you to approve those interfund transfers separately, so that we'll have a separate page for that. And the little bit of change in the process this year, you'll have to set a date of public hearing for a maximum levy, and then we have that levy now.
Yeah, they're up there.
And I'm going to move that out here. Let me expand that. I'm sliding across the screen. So it's disappeared from mine now. Let me see if I can. I'm having to watch this. So. There. Okay, so this is the new form that goes out where we post the maximum levy rate. And the draft that we sent you, and this does not include the debt service levy, so that's going to be a different amount than the 10.14 that we had talked about. Now it's a half a cent difference. But you'll set a public hearing on a maximum levy of 6.99654, and that includes that a little over 0.4 of a cent that we added to fund the reduction in the rents for the auditorium. So we'll set the date for the hearing. The hearing will be for this rate. We'll hold that hearing. And then once we do that, we can then set the date for adoption of the budget on the 10th.
Does the motion need to include that number in it?
It does.
Okay.
Yeah, we have to publish this. So you have to set the motion to set this as a hearing on this rate. Well, actually, you're adopting this sheet.
all right, so
Gotta write it down.
just so
6.9.
6.99654 is your maximum levy.
say that again, please.
6.99654.
So just so we're clear, do we want the motion to that date of public hearing to adopt the maximum city property tax levy of 6.99654 for FY 2021? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
So
Anything else in that motion? Or we're good?
Set the date is the 25th.
Okay, all right. So I entertain a motion to set February 25th, 2020 as a date of public hearing to adopt a maximum city property tax levy of $6.99654 for FY 2021.
so moved.
Oh, that's my motion.
All right,
Second.
Or second.
all right. Betcher moved, Betty Hansen seconded. Discussion? Roll call.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And then is item H as in the agenda?
On H, we will not do that right now. We'll wait till you hold the hearing on the 25th. And then we'll set that date after that. So we can skip H or not take action on that right now.
Would it be helpful to have this motion so that the clerk can publish this date?
No, you have to hold your hearing first.
We have to have the hearing first
On
before
the
you set the next
25th,
one?
yes.
Okay. I just know there's certain windows of time that you have to have, no
Yeah, it's
less than so many days.
10
not
and
more.
20. So with adoption on March 10th, we would fall within that.
So we'll set that on the 25th then.
Yes.
Okay. I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, this
know
is
we
our
got-
first year through, so
Yeah, we got
and
some
we
new,
spent some extra time going through this, and we've also verified things with the Iowa Department of Management to
Good.
make sure we get it right the first time.
All right. Is there anything else that you would like to discuss or cover on the 2019-20 or 2020-21 budget tonight?
I don't think so. We got it all.
No, I think that's it. Everything. Thank you.
Well, again, on behalf of council, thank you for all your efforts in guiding us through this. I know it's an awful lot of work, but it's an amazing document and well done. Thank you.
Our pleasure.
All right. We are going to now move into the regular city council meeting, and just give us a minute when we get City Manager Shanker up here, and we'll move in right on to consent. Oh, no. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, going to move on to consent agenda, and council staff has asked that that item 17A, resolution accepting transfer of right-of-way quitclaim deeds be pulled from consent. That is not necessary, so only be voting on the resolution approving the plat of survey. Council wish to pull any other items from the consent agenda? Hearing none, entertain a
I think we need to pull item 2. That's minutes just to amend as according to what we have in front of us.
Gotcha. All right. Hold on. Item number 2. All right. Anything else? Thank you, David. All right. Entertain a motion to approve consent less item number 2 and 17A.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, David?
For item number 2, we have a correction to the minutes in front of us here at the dais. I would move that we accept these minutes as amended.
So moved.
All right. Item 2 has a whole bunch of them. So you want to move all of them and as corrected for 28?
Happy to do that. I move that we,
You want to withdraw your
I'll
motion?
withdraw the motion
Thank you.
and move that we approve all of the minutes except for January 28th, in which we approve it as amended.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded? Okay. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. All right, and move open onto public forum. Is anyone in the audience who wishes to address council on any topic which is not on the agenda this evening? Seeing none, we will close public forum, move on to item 18, resolution approving policy regarding parking meter waivers for special events. Brian?
Thank you, Mayor. Back in January, the council directed us to draft a policy, a potential policy related to how parking meter closures and free parking would be handled for special events. The council action form in front of you has draft language regarding that policy, which we believe reflects what the council's intent was at that discussion. So in the future, the way this would work, if the council adopts this policy, we will not waive metered parking fees for special events. We would use the funds that you've allocated in the budget to transfer and reimburse the parking fund for area-wide free parking that is provided through CAA and Main Street Cultural District events, or Ames Main Street events. I'm sorry. But there may be waivers to that policy on a case-by-case basis. So for small events, for example, where a handful of parking spaces may be obstructed, the council would consider whether to waive the requirement to reimburse that parking, but that the council would not waive parking fees for area-wide free parking outside of the indicated Main Street or Ames Main Street and CAA events. So that is what we understand your policy to be. We've outlined for you what the cost is, and you have already approved funding in the budget as a transfer to make that happen. Our recommendation would be that this policy would go into effect for all events that take place on or after July 1 of the upcoming year. You do have a couple of potential parking requests on the agenda shortly after this. The first two, Music Walk and Art Walk, take place before July 1. So it would be our recommendation that you simply follow through under the old system of approving those on a case-by-case basis. The third one, item 21 on your agenda, is for summer sidewalk sales in the downtown area. That takes place after July 1, and you have allocated funding in the budget to reimburse the parking fund for that. So it would be the recommendation that for summer sidewalk sales, you approve the suspension of the parking regulations, but do not waive the fees. You require reimbursement for those fees using the money you've now allocated.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of pieces there, but I think it aligns with what your direction was at the last regular council meeting and with what the actions you've already taken are in the proposed FY 2021 budget.
Okay, questions for staff?
Well, I want to thank you for pulling this all together. It was pretty complicated. You had to do outreach to get the figures, adjust the budget, and so on. I think one of the advantages of this policy going forward is that we'll have sort of one place to look for all of our funding support for organizations on a yearly basis, rather than having it kind of spread out throughout the year in ways that it's hard for us to remember and act upon. So thank you.
All right.
Move alternative one.
Second.
Oops, sorry.
Let me see. I'm going to open up public comment. Does
Oh,
anyone in the
Withdraw.
audience want to address council on this particular topic this evening? Seeing none, close public comment. Go ahead.
Move alternative one.
Second.
All right, discussion?
So there is no consistent way the parking is done. In the material that you provided in the prior council materials, cities around Iowa do this differently. And so I don't think there's a right or wrong way of doing this. But neither am I convinced that the way we're doing it was somehow wrong. And it seems like the system had worked well. And it seems after tonight's budgeting exercise, we're doing is taking money out of one pocket and moving into another. And so the net effect of this is I'm having trouble wrapping my brain around. It seems like we worked very hard to accomplish a shifting of money from one pocket to the other. And as a result of that, I'm going to vote against this.
Other comments, questions?
I'll just mention that I'm going to follow this with another motion about reflecting parking costs going forward through the next year. And we'll see whether we can reach an agreement on that or not. But I agree, if that's all we end up doing, then it's not that effective. I think we need to do a little more.
I agree with your first observation, David, that having this all in one place so we can see the total amounts that we're actually allocating for parking is helpful. And so that's maybe the biggest value in doing it that way, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. Roll call?
Aye.
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 Nay.
Thank you. David?
And I think now, well, okay, what I'd like to see happen is that that everyone, so for this year, we made an exception because of the way this was rolled out. But I think going into the outside funding request process for next year, I would like to see all of the applicants be very clear about what they're asking for in terms of parking support from the city, and have that compete equally with their other requests from the same organization, and so that can be evaluated against other organizations' requests. So to accomplish that, I would move to ask the staff to update the outside funding request guidelines to have applicants account for all amounts they're asking the city to cover for parking, whether obstructed parking spaces or not.
Second.
Moved to second, discussion?
It makes sense as a follow-up. Otherwise, how would we measure that?
And so the idea then is when in the fall, when we're deciding how to change our outside funding requests, we would set, percent number like we do, but now the parking has to live within that percentage number of increase that we're doing. And it's going to motivate the applicants to consider, well, do they want to ask for funding for parking? Do they want to ask for funding for something else? And that gives us a way to say, well, if we're spending too much money on things, then we can reduce that percentage.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like if we're going to go through and have them ask us for the money that before we were waiving, I think they're going to want to make it clear to us what that line item is in the request.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know that a motion is required in this. I think they're going to do this anyway, but if it would help, it's fine.
Other discussion, comments? Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Anything else in this item? Okay, moving on to item number 19, request from Ames Main Street for Music Walk on Thursday, April 23rd, 2020. Right? Any questions for staff?
No.
Entertain a motion on resolution approving waiver of parking meter fees and enforcement, usage and waiver of electrical fees, and waiver of fee for blanket vending license for Ames Main Street from 3 p.m. until 9 p.m.
So moved?
Second.
Moving second. Discussion? Roll call?
Aye.
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 Okay, item 20. Any questions for staff on this item? Entertain a motion approving waiver of parking meter fees and enforcement, usage and waiver of electrical fees, and waiver of fee for blanket vending license for Ames Main Street from 3 p.m. until 8:30 p.m.
So moved?
Second.
Okay, moved to second. Discussion? Roll call?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Any questions for staff on item number 21, request from Ames Main Street for summer sidewalk sales on Saturday, July 25th, 2020? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion on the resolution approving suspension of parking regulations and enforcement in the downtown from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and require reimbursement for parking meter fees from the local option sales tax fund.
So moved?
Second.
And that's consistent with what we did earlier, in your opinion, right?
Yes.
Good.
That'll be your first transfer.
Okay? Roll call?
Aye.
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 Very good. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Okay, can move on to item 22, clarification of motion regarding growth scenarios in Ames 2040 plan. And I believe there are people here in the audience that are interested in this. I just want to make it clear that there's no public comment tonight. This only is seeking clarification on the motion where there was apparently some possible confusion on the motion that was made. And so it's going to be council discussion, motion, and then we'll move on.
So I can start and Kelly will walk you through this, but back in January 28th, staff sought council's direction to move forward on specific growth scenarios that you prefer us to look in more detail on. And there were two motions. One motion was that that you call for the inclusion of tier 1 areas in all directions. You want us to study that, right? And that passed 4-2. The second motion directed staff to incorporate, and the consultants to incorporate tier 2 areas in the west and south areas. And that passed 6-0. But following the council meeting, I had some conversations with a number of council members, and although it passed 6-0, it became apparent that there maybe was not agreement on what the council voted on, what actually west meant. So I bring that, it seems there's a difference of opinion and maybe 3-3 split on what you were voting on. So I thought it'd be good this is a very important step. So I wanted to bring it back before council. Kelly can help clarify, or you can help clarify your thoughts. And hopefully maybe we're in sync, or maybe it needs a new motion or more new direction. So I know it was very confusing because terminology was west and there was southwest. Some people thought when they voted on west, that included both areas north and south of Highway 30. Some people thought it only meant north of Highway 30, and I could see why there'd be confusion. So we take responsibility for that. I just want to make sure in this important step, we get the right direction from the council.
Mayor, I'm curious procedurally, how do we undo
Mark and
a vote that
We've,
we took 6-0?
Well, first of all,
Mark.
I just don't remember doing this. How do we do it?
Well, we have to have a motion to reconsider. A motion to reconsider the motion that was done before.
Yep.
And so we do a motion to reconsider. If that passes, then you can.
Okay, we've done that before. It doesn't require someone in the
prevailing.
Everywhere else.
Prevailing
We were all
side, which was
prevailing.
everybody.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah,
I
it
will
was
make-
everybody.
I'll make
So-
the motion. I got the language from Mark.
Well,
Yeah.
first of all,
And
because-
so I made the original motion at that meeting. And so my intent, just for everyone, was to include the Southwest area as
Also.
part of it. Yes. Yep.
And I seconded, and my intent was not to include the southwest area. So,
let's is there any questions for Kelly or Kellyanne, or do you have anything before we go on any
I'm
motion?
going to throw up the map just in case we don't.
Can't log in for some reason. So it's the same graphics that we're going to
Yeah.
deliver to you with the
Okay.
agenda.
Just want the public to see it.
Are there any questions for Kelly on this at all,
No.
or Mark? Were you going to put something up, Kelly, or not?
I don't know why I can't get into the
Okay.
into the
All right.
drive. I can put a black and white version up, but
I don't know that we even need it.
All right. Lori, you want to go ahead and make the motion?
so I would move that we reconsider the motion made on January 28th to direct staff to incorporate in planning 2-tier growth areas in the west and south.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, discussion.
So if, one more procedural question, Mark, if I could. Sorry, I just want to get this right. What if the motion to reconsider fails
then it stands.
Then it stands.
Stands as is.
And, but then we've got this sort of odd situation where we have council members who are saying that really wasn't what I voted for.
Well, I would say then that I mean, you're right. I would say then that you should probably, no matter which side you're on this, vote for the motion to reconsider so that you can go back and talk about it and clarify where the council's at on it.
Okay.
Other questions from Mark? Everyone stand the motion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining? That motion carried. Okay.
Thank you, Mark.
Sure.
All right, discussion on this topic.
I'll jump in and say that I think that when I voted on the motion originally, I understood it to be west, both north and south of Highway 30. That being said, I like the prospects that we have north of Highway 30 a little bit better. And so I think if that's the prevailing thought that everyone else had, I would be supportive of west, north of Highway 30 rather than both.
Other comments?
For me personally, the way I've seen the material broken out was always southwest separate from south and west. So that was how I understood it in the original vote. And that's kind of my similar thought now would be to support west growth north of Highway 30.
I
Anything
had the
else?
same understanding that Rachel did.
Yeah, I can see how it happened. I mean, when we had talked about the tier scenarios, they had listed west and southwest differently. And so I can see when we said west, how some people thought that meant west and not southwest. So,
Other comments? Kelly, just so when we get a motion on the floor, specifically, what would be helpful so you have clear direction on that? If we say, if it said west, would west north of Highway 30, if that's the motion, or west north and south of Highway 30, what would you prefer? So we keep it consistent with what the Ames 2040 plan.
So it seems like the consensus is the only question is the area south of the Highway 30 being in or out. So as long as the motion references something in regards to Highway 30, I think it'll be clear for all of us.
Right.
So I would make a motion that we incorporate into our planning the growth areas in the south and in the west north of Highway 30.
tier 2, right?
Tier 2. Thank you. Sorry.
I'll second.
Okay. Everyone clear in the motion?
Kelly, I have one question. So are there any advantages from a development perspective of deploying infrastructure in the west, both north and south of Highway 30? So you see what I'm saying?
So the one unique issue is the sanitary sewer. The area in the west between Lincoln Way and the railroad tracks right now we think ties into sewer systems that exist in the city already. But at some point, which wasn't clear in HDR's modeling because we haven't completed all of our utility upgrades, there would be a need for long-term more sewer capacity to see really full build out of that area. It might be tier 3. It might be the very end of a tier 2. And the only way to get there is to go through the southwest area. That's the only like bypass sewer line that could exist. So if you ever really want to intensify the west area north of Highway 30, you have to come around from the south. So you would think that if you're going to extend that sewer line, you would plan to use it, not just wrap the city with it. It's not an immediate issue, but it's one that long term, I think, again, it's that fringe issue. It's not tier 1. It's a fringe issue of tier 2 versus tier 3 that we couldn't tell you at this point exactly what that means.
So if play out just two models for me, if we go with just the development west and north of 30 in isolation, and then at a later point, then add the southwest for tier 2, is the city any worse off because we deploy that infrastructure differently than at the same time? I guess that's what I'm trying to tease out. These are big ticket items, and I just want to make sure we know what we're doing.
Well, to a certain extent, it's an unknown too, right? Because they haven't completed the work that we'll need to have completed
we won't have that answer. I mean, until this is the kind of the true like full north of Highway 30 build out is not something we'll be able to tell you at this point in the process. I mean, we've drawn this relatively arbitrary line to try and predict uses and all of that. The only thing we know for sure is on the southwest, you have that 1 mile gap, slightly more than 1 mile, just to get to that area. And then you would extend it through and up. It's nothing that we've done on any infrastructure is next year, put that project in to the CIP and start constructing it, because you have road issues that you need to address. You have sewer, you have what everybody has an issue in each part of the city. You haven't made any motions about what to fund first or if to fund it at all, wait for developer contributions. None of that's been discussed. So I don't think you could attach one specific infrastructure issue here that's any different than any other issue that was identified in the analysis for the other directions.
Yeah.
But clearly the north, the east, and the south, those are separate. But because of the proximity of the west and the southwest, they're adjoining. I think it's a fair question to make sure that we're not. I just want to be careful of the inadvertent consequences of this.
Well, I think it'd be helpful, Kelly. Would you just clarify, because there are people here in the audience, that just because they're saying the motion is to do west north of 30, that does not automatically preclude someone from coming in the city in the future and annexing property south if a property owner wanted to do that. Is that correct?
So I think that's something you guys are going to have to give us direction on. But I think the way I'm kind of envisioning this come together is that this is all I can get to work right now. I don't know why the video is not working well, or the projection off the screen. That I think that I would be proposing that you're going to have some kind of policy that sets up what are the conditions you're willing to annex. Because I said,
I'm sorry.
Under what circumstances or conditions are you willing to annex? Because I think I said on the 28th, there's other pieces of land that touch the city that just weren't purely within a growth area. I think could easily be annexed if the developer or a property owner wanted to do that. So you're going to have to write a policy that either says you have to be in a growth area, or under these circumstances, you could propose to be annexed to the city. So if you follow that direction, that you create a policy, there's nothing saying that tier 2, which is this southwest area or any other area, if someone wants to come in and say, hey, I can make this work, that you would entertain that option. That's going to be the big question about, we've highlighted a lot of areas. They're probably geared towards proactive efforts by the city, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily exclusive. I think in the past, we've had interest in this land. Mr. McKay off and on again has wanted to sell. Sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. We've had other people indicate, well, if things started to happen, maybe we would look at selling land. Clearly not everybody wants that. I mean, you've had a lot of comment in this area too. I think it's one of the first areas that would be asked to be different than whatever's adopted, just based on the large amount of lands that are under some people's control, that they could come in and say, I have a large piece of land. I can change the fortunes of this area if you're willing to annex.
But we wouldn't incentive. I mean, if we make a policy of encouraging growth in the other tiers, anything that's not in those would be.
I don't know. We haven't got into implementation with you yet. I mean, we're still sorting out what do the uses mean. Clearly, if you invested a lot of money to do one thing in another part of town, you're probably not able to invest in somebody else's ideas. But if they were the first one in, before you did anything else, does that change a council's position about where they invest? I don't know. Those are things that we can't tell you right now because you haven't adopted those policies. We haven't laid out options for you. And I put that more in the implementation side after we get through kind of truly what are the land use, what are the transportation, what are the environmental, and what are the housing policies.
So review again, on the basis, if this motion passes, the reason you want this motion is so staff and RDG can do what?
So that we can give you kind of that full calculation of what areas could yield for housing and commercial, and how do we want to create policies that prioritize the layout of those areas. Mm-hmm. The old plan would just put a blob there and say, we think 3,000 houses are going to be here or something along those lines. I think we want a little more intentionality to reach our other goals. So if the geography is more constrained, then you're going to get a different pattern proposed by RDG to meet your housing goals, your commercial goals. If it's a broader area, it gives just more choices on where those things may or may not happen and how you see that being done.
And I know there's people that have expressed, a graded version, but I just want to make sure that we're clear that just because council tonight is voting to do what they're doing does not mean that for the next 20 years, council may not consider something south of Highway 30, correct?
I don't think so. I mean, the plan hasn't been written yet, but that's clearly not the direction I think we're looking to deal with. All the scenarios task sets up a comp plan that can let you be adaptable to areas rather than one specific area being locked in.
And I'm not saying that would happen. I'm not saying that council's going to do that, but I think we want to make sure that everyone understands this motion tonight is not locking the council in or future councils in to say we're never going to go south of 30 if something else comes up. It's just we're not planning for it at this point in time unless you help us develop policy. And at that time, policy is if it's not shown, it's not going to happen. Is that correct? That would
Yeah,
be a policy
unless a
decision.
very black and white policy is adopted by the council in the comp plan, which is kind of how it is today. I wouldn't make that expectation.
Right,
And even if
because
you put
we're
that
already
in,
reserving all of the other areas.
I would still recommend
So-
you reserve it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. This
Yeah.
is an area that you absolutely should reserve.
Yeah.
We've shown it's very practical to develop. You have an interchange and a water tower there to support its development. You made that investment in the last 20 years. Why would we walk away from that?
Right.
So I just want to make sure we're all on the same page because I don't want anyone to have false hope or expectations. And then if 3 or 4 years down the road, all of a sudden this comes back, she'll say, well, wait a minute, you voted this way. It's just, we just want to go on record that this may develop. But at this point in time, the focus is going to be north of 30, but that doesn't mean that it couldn't happen south because we are reserving those areas around there. Is that
And
correct?
that's the same for all the areas. It's not
Correct,
just this
right.
one.
Yeah, it could be going
The only-
north, could go east. Could
The
go
only
south.
unique part is this is shown as a tier 2. The others don't show other tier 2s. They're 3s and 4s.
Right.
That's the only difference here.
Kelly, can you remind us whether we have seen a projection for when we might hit tier 2s in going through infill and tier 1s?
No, so we haven't done that yet. And even then, I can't remember, did we give you an estimate of what the total of tier 2 and tier 3 is? I think it's in the upper 20,000s. If you did all of the tier 2 and all of the tier 1s, I think the total capacity was in the mid 20s, something along those lines. So we're probably not going to be able to tell you that because it's going to depend on which direction the market kind of moves, which areas are first. We're clearly not going to add 20,000 people to the city in the next 20 years. That's not a reasonable growth projection. So would it all go west and get there sooner rather than later, or is it going to be spread out and take a long time? That's what we don't know.
Well, I mean, all tier 1s, which we already directed you to pursue, that's already 15,000 right there. All tier 1s. What's the number you gave us in the tiers?
That was the estimate based on, and we're going to revise that because that was just cutting up RDG's scenarios without contemplating if there was a hard line where you didn't think growth would happen or
sure.
not. So those numbers will probably come down slightly. Plus it had all the density assumptions about whether you have an average density of 8 or 12 or 5. So those numbers are going to move around.
Sure.
But yes, it was our idea that in some ways you could get to 15 just in blue. In reality, it's probably going to come down when we come back with those numbers.
Well, we'll make up for it in infill, right?
Yeah, then we might just make up for it at infill.
That's
But
right.
yes.
Okay, other questions or comments for Kelly? Everyone understand the motion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining? Motion carried.
So I'm just going to go ahead and make a motion just because we're in the midst of it. I'm going to go ahead and have a separate motion that we deploy phase 2 to the southwest growth area.
Phase 2 or tier 2?
I'm sorry, tier 2 to the southwest area. Yeah, to the southwest area, the area west or south of Highway 30. Just to get people's votes on the record on this.
But that
First of all,
motion-
so your motion is, just be clear on that and so we can see if we can get a second. Is to go to tier 2 in the southwest or in the area south of 30, is that correct?
Correct.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Gotcha.
So
All right.
I'm not sure how that fits with the previous motion, which said, I guess it's an addition to, right? So it's essentially
Absolutely.
adding on to create what we had previously if it were the whole West.
Correct.
Right?
So we gave everybody the opportunity to reset the clock and to vote fresh. And so we voted on the area north of Highway 30. I think it's fair to give people an opportunity to vote on the area south of Highway 30, which was the original motion.
All right. Other discussion?
I would just say my earlier vote, I mean, I think I would have voted no on Gloria's motion to do the stuff only north of Highway 30. I mean, so I'll reiterate with this vote now, but I mean, not to say we can't annex land, like John wanted to be very clear, you know, it doesn't mean that we wouldn't consider that area, but in terms of what we incentivize, perhaps, I mean, we haven't even talked about those incentives yet, but in terms of what we'd incentivize, I'm more comfortable only doing that north of 30.
David?
Yeah, I understand these motions to be about what to emphasize at this point, what to develop and sort of try to ripen for our understanding. And I feel like by having designated the south area, which we all liked a lot, and the north of US 30 in the west area, that we have a lot of land on the table, plus all the tier ones. So I'd prefer that be the initial emphasis. So that's why I'll vote against this.
And the only argument I would make in this is that because of the fact that these areas are adjoining, I think there's some efficiencies to be gained from a development purpose to do both at the same time.
Okay. Any other comments? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
Motion failed. 2-4. Anything else? Okay, we'll move on to item 23. Thank you, Kelly. Oh, you're on 23 also. Resolution approving urban revitalization applications for 415 Staten Avenue and 201 Gray for tax exemption. Any questions for Kelly? All right, I'd entertain a motion approving urban revitalization applications for 415 Stanton Avenue and 201 Gray Avenue for tax exemption.
So moved.
Second?
Roll call?
Aye.
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 Okay, item 24. Does anybody have any questions for Vanessa regarding the amendment to the purchase agreement with Habitat for Humanity for 3305 Morningside Street? Okay, hearing none, entertain a motion on resolution approving an amendment to the purchase agreement with Habitat Humanity of Central Iowa, granting time extension to construction completion date and the closing date of property at 3305 Morningside Street.
So moved?
Second.
Before we vote, do you need a specific date, Vanessa, in the closing date or not in the motion?
No, just on or before.
On or before May 31st,
For
2020.
completion and on or before June 30th for closing. So whatever the dates fall, we just want to be done by the end of that date, on or before.
I apologize. I should have.
Do we need a friendly amendment?
Yes.
For that? So I would make a friendly amendment that we state the date for completion, construction completion as on or before May 31st, 2020, and the closing completion date on or before June 30th, 2020.
Thank you. Okay. Roll call.
Aye.
Abstain, conflict of interest.
Aye.
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 Okay, item 25.
It is that time of year again that we are working on our 2021 annual action plan because we just finished our 5-year plan back. It just got approved in December, so we are already into next fiscal year. However, normally we try to go and do a combination of the public and the council meeting together, kind of talk about what's everybody's priorities for our action plan. But now that we've finished our consolidated plan, we've kind of outlined what our goals are going to be for the next 5 years. Of course, you do have the option of changing those during that 5-year period. But we did talk about that we were going to use both CDBG and home funds to complete 321 State Avenue for public infrastructure and new home construction, and that we're going to implement a home buyer assistance program. And then we were going to use CDBG funds to acquire, demolish, rehabilitate housing, deteriorated housing citywide, to use these homes to either for our own purposes or to sell to a nonprofit. And then we're also going to, we just amended our this year's plan to include the completion of a shared use bike path in the west neighborhood. We're also going to be focusing on home funds of doing new construction at 321 State Avenue. So these were the proposals that we're doing based on what we've been working on these last year or so. And so before I go out for public comment, I just wanted to make sure if there's anything else that the council would like for us to consider, so that when we go out to the public, we are really capturing what is on your agenda, as well as what they may suggest when I bring the final recommendations back to you, so that we can kind of stay on track on getting this submitted to HUD by May 17th. So we feel that what we just laid out for you meets the commitments of the 5-year plan, and that it also outlines the things that we found in our fair housing impediment study, which is to continue to utilize CDBG home funds to create public partnerships, increase the supply of single-family, two-family homes, reduce the burden for low-income households, and to increase affordability. And then for non-low-income households, utilize our funds to do a housing that's mixed income and any type of deteriorated neighborhoods that we could use for code enforcement or remove any blight or slum. So these kind of fit into those priorities, but I just wanted to get your input before we go out for public comment.
Questions, comments? Go ahead.
Do we have any idea, Vanessa, whether HUD or the Congress is targeting the CDBG programs again?
I just got an email today that the proposal came out from the president to eliminate both home and CDBG. But that comes out the whole time. So far, it hasn't happened, but that is being proposed. I got that email today.
I have a couple of quick questions for you and it's just on your attachment 1, Vanessa, the very bottom of the page. Number 1 says supply of housing for lower income households for renting, and then the cost of housing for lower income households for both renting and home buying. And you have in bold print or type, major difference from the 2014-19 data is the cost of housing is now number 1 and availability of housing is now number 2. So do those get switched around, or what? How do we just make sure that when this goes out or when eventually the council adopts it, it's in the proper order? Does that make sense?
Oh, okay. Yes, I see what you're saying. When we did our impediment study, it was just a reverse of the impediment study that we did 5 years ago. But I would double check and make sure that that's accurate as far as which switched.
Yeah. Is there, because one is, those are enlisted in order of priority. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And last question is on the attachment 3, home ownership construction program. The budget is shown at 1.285 million. How can that money be used? Can it be used for single family and multifamily if that project goes through, like for apartments or townhomes or whatever? Or how can that be used?
It is my understanding that home can be used for single family construction and also can be used for multifamily construction, but I don't know when we say multifamily, I think it's more like maybe duplexes or townhomes, but I can clarify that and let council know to make sure, but I think it's more than single family.
Okay. All right. Any questions? All right, I'm going to open up public comment. Does anyone in the audience wish to address council on this particular topic? Seeing none, close public comment and entertain a motion on alternative 1, 2, or 3.
I would move alternative 1, which is approving the proposed 2021 annual action plan program projects and proposed budget in connection with the city's community development block grant programs as outlined in the staff report, and direct staff to host public forums on citizen input and feedback prior to finalizing the draft of the 2020-2021 annual action plan.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Discussion? All right, those in, we're just moving to authorize you to go ahead and go. This is not a resolution approving the final plan, correct?
Correct. This is just to go get public comment, bring those back to you, and then get the plan written and then put it out for our 30-day comment period to hopefully meet our May 17th submittal deadline.
Okay. It does have budget. Let's go ahead and do roll call just for record.
Aye.
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 Thanks for your efforts on this, Vanessa.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. All right, moving on to item 26, resolution approving FEMA grant funding agreement with the Iowa Department of Homeland Security.
A bit of good news again.
Yeah.
Good evening. So we've received very positive news that our nationally competitive grant to FEMA for the flood mitigation project in the South Duff area has been approved. And this is the agreement to fund that project. So what we would do is sign the agreement and then we send it down to Iowa Homeland Security for their signatures. And once we have that, then we can start working on the final design and moving towards land acquisition and negotiations with the properties.
Any questions for
This
staff?
is crucial in the strategy to reduce flooding in South Duff. Remember that? Many years in the making. And Tracy stuck with it and hung in there and got us the grant after first rejection. So it's positive. Meets one of the feedback you've gotten from in your citizen satisfaction survey about reducing flooding, both river flooding and overland flooding from stormwater. So it's in keeping with your goals.
Okay. Any questions for Tracy? All right, open up public input or comment on this particular item. Anyone in the audience want to address council on this?
I didn't fill out a card.
If you want to just give your name and
James Howe. I've got Howe's Welding and Metal Fabrication on South Duff. I'm one of the first ones to flood. I guess I just want to make sure everybody gets to know me when I was fighting with the Duff median and all that. And so I just want to make sure that people are involved, that the way they're messing with the river, we need to make sure that we're not messing with our neighbors downstream. And the river's going to win no matter what. So it's one of those things that we need to be careful on how we're doing it and in what fashion they're doing it. We're going to lose a lot of trees. I'm not a tree hugger, but I do not like to just yank trees for no reason. And Tracy came down to the shop today, and as long as we're involved, I'm not opposed to it by any means. Obviously, I've flooded more than anybody else on Duff now since I've stuck it out longer than anybody else. But I'd like to make sure that there is involvement with both downstream. Upstream, I'm not too worried about what we're going to do to, but there's going to be some definite downstream consequences, I think, at some point. So I just want to make sure the property owners are involved, which Tracy has indicated there will be, but I just want to make sure that's still in the plan.
All right. Thank you, Jim.
Yep.
Anybody else? Close public comment. Tracy, do you want any
Yeah.
comment on that?
Yeah, so we'll be reaching out to the property owners and we'll have project informational meetings. I know there's a lot of information. We talked today that, you know, a lot of the residents have maybe some misunderstandings of what the project is or questions about what the project is. And so we're using bioengineering measures. The FEMA grant was the first one awarded really based on resiliency. And that resiliency is that the bioengineering, so using both rock and native plants, will stabilize things and last even in the higher flood events. And so we've already incorporated those measures using FEMA funding on Squaw Creek just south of Lincoln Way. And we've been able to show time and time again when the water came up that it has held and it's stable. So that resiliency was a big part of us achieving this. And Iowa Homeland Security says this is really a big grant opportunity for us. And they, both Ames and the state, this is a really big achievement. And so we'll be reaching out to all the landowners, obviously, and the residents, and we'll get that final design and the details to house and everybody else.
Can you comment on, is there any work can be done on that bridge by the DOT in the future? The bridge over Squaw Creek? I mean,
So
wasn't
the
some
South
discussion-
Duff Bridge?
Yeah, South, I'm sorry, South Duff Bridge, yeah.
The South Duff Bridge, so a lot of what we're doing is opening up a lot of the excess sediment that's there and opening up the channel capacity. Our modeling shows we're not affecting people downstream because when squaw's up, skunk's also up, and we are not impacting. If for anything, we're reducing those impacts like we've had the goal to do. We have heard from the DOT that they're looking at a widening in 2023, I believe it was, for the South Duff bridges, or the Highway 30 bridges, sorry. But I don't have any ideas of any work that they're going to do on the South Duff Bridge, but the Highway 30 bridge they're going to look at.
I'm sorry, I must have misheard. I thought it was the South Duff Bridge. There was going to be something work done on it. And
Yeah.
I want to make sure it was. Is that?
I said just under it, digging
Yep,
out this.
we'll be digging out from under it.
Okay.
Yep.
I would entertain a motion on resolution approving the FEMA grant funding agreement with the Iowa Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management for Flood Mitigation River Flooding Project.
So moved.
Second.
Move second. Any further discussion?
So I have one comment, and that is I have been consistently voting against this project. However, it's clear that the project's moving forward, and I think it would be very short-sighted of me to say, no, I don't want federal money to help with this project. And I do commend Tracy for hanging in there and getting this very difficult to get grant. So I will be voting in favor of this, despite the fact that I still really do not like the project.
All right. Roll call.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
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 Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. All right. Moving on to item 27. 2019-2020 signal traffic program. I entertain a motion accepting report of no bids on this project.
Aw. I don't want to. I don't want to move it. Why didn't we get any? So moved.
Second.
All right. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? You know what? I got to back up.
Uh-oh.
Should have had a public hearing to start with. My bad.
Oh.
All right.
Hearing on no bids.
What's that?
Hearing on no bids, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to declare a public hearing on the 2019-2020 traffic signal program, Lincoln Way Beach, to be open. Is there anyone that wants to address council on this? Seeing none, close public hearing.
Do you want us to redo those motions?
Gonna do a motion again?
Yeah, I would move that we accept the report of no bids.
Second. She loves it so much, she moved it twice.
Yeah, exactly.
Those in favor say aye.
Still sad.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. All right, item 28, entertain a motion on second passage of ordinance rezoning 2800 East 13th Street from agricultural A to general industrial GI.
Move on second?
Second.
All right. Roll call, please.
Aye.
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 Okay, disposition of communications to council. There are 5 items tonight.
Oh, man.
Item 1 is memo from Kelly on a request to initiate land use policy plan for property located at 802 Delaware Avenue.
In talking to Kelly, I think this is an issue that is worthy of a discussion in a council meeting.
I would move, oh,
Go ahead.
I would move that we put this item on an agenda.
Second.
All right, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Second is a letter from Jerry Peters, Director of Facilities Planning and Management for Ames Community Schools regarding building permit fee variance for the high school.
Steve, on this one, do we have some history with respect to how we've handled similar requests with respect to the middle school and other elementary schools?
I believe they have paid in the past. We have not given them a discount or anything. And in fact, I think we treat ourselves, even our own projects, we pay for the water treatment plant, we'll pay for the new, any one of our facilities. I will say there was one exception, and that's when, I believe we waived building permits when the Economic Development Commission put together a $1 million hangar and they gave it to us. And that was your contribution to the project, if you remember.
I remember that.
And I don't remember, do we do that for the Miracle Park, did we waive
No.
building permits? I don't think so.
No.
So I'm not sure, I can remember even with a city project, like a swimming pool or a fire station, we waived it. I might be wrong, but I don't believe that's ever happened. And I know we paid for the water treatment plant.
Should we, I mean, would you want motion to communicate that that's not our
Would I want?
practice?
Well, I think-
What's the best way to handle? I mean, we don't want to just ignore it, right? We have to respond somehow.
So, but there's a request for a variance to the permit fee that's other than this particular request, if I'm reading this
There are
correctly.
two of them, I think, they would like to move ahead with starting the project and they want to put down 25% down payment until you work out this issue.
But
We don't-
if
But
we
if we
don't,
work it out quickly.
If you work it out quickly, isn't that, they're asking for the 25%?
They're asking for the 25%. So I guess my question is, do we deal with this in isolation of the variance request that apparently is coming?
No, there is another,
There is an-
there's another request. I think they want to split 50-50. What they,
Oh, it's the second half of it.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
sorry. So then those are two different issues, though.
Mhm.
Well, unless that, if you make a
We're not in.
decision on one, there'd be,
There's nothing to do on the other one.
So
So I'm struggling with this a little bit. So I think that we have to be careful to make sure that the services that we provide in terms of inspection, so there are things that we're doing to earn these fees. There's a whole host of inspections along the way.
I tried to explain to you during budget time, we don't do it on an hourly basis. You understand?
Right.
There's best practices. They do it on a, electric's based on a per outlet. There's a per plumbing fixture. There's the value of the building. The way we apply it is not different. I think a lot of cities do that. So, and sometimes we try to estimate what we'll have in revenue. And even by applying these factors, sometimes we come up short. Sometimes we come up long. In other words, sometimes we have more revenue than expenditures. That goes into the general fund available balance. That helps us in the years when the revenues don't match our expenditures. So it's not a perfect science, but it's not like an attorney bills on actual time. And even if you were to build on actual time, you'd have to put in, well, we wouldn't do this, but I think what they're requesting doesn't include, there's office overhead, there's roll up on salaries, there's cars, there's our computer system, all those kind of things. If you're trying to capture it all, but we can't be guaranteed a certain number of hours, so we don't do it that way. They're asking, I would call it various, they're just asking you to consider another way to charge them. And applying our formula, they liked, I believe they've calculated it to be, was it $320,000 or $330,000? And they'd like to pay half of that and you share the cost. In other words, you defer revenue. It's not really out of pocket, it just should be short revenue than normally.
This thing is confusing to me because this is different than other situations. If I'm a taxpayer in Ames, whether I pay this money through the city portion of the general fund or through the school, it's still sort of a wash, right?
It's all in your taxes, that's right.
Yeah.
And they've built multiple schools in the last 15 years,
Yeah,
and this
with-
has never come up before.
There's no
No.
precedent to,
There's not
yeah.
any reason to do this.
And I assume that when they created their budget, they would have built this into the budget. I mean, so I want to be helpful, but I don't understand how at the end of the day, we're really moving the ball down the field with this.
So I would move that we not take action on these things and we ask the mayor to write a letter or communicate with them that we are not interested in
Second.
taking action.
Second.
Those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining? Carried. Okay. Item 3 on the memo from John Joyner regarding the inclusive crosswalk.
Just to follow up on this, you asked us, we had bid this out once before for we thought would be a more permanent type of solution. Remember, it was over budget. We thought it was the time of the year we bid that. We went ahead and used paint, if you remember. Actually, that's holding up pretty well, but it wouldn't hold up as much as the plastic adhesive. We rebid that as you directed and actually came in greater than our first proposal, our first bid, which was even high in our expectations. So we're suggesting we not go ahead and try this technique anymore, but continue to paint it when needed. It might be a great project for some volunteers to help us. We would have Public Works supervise it, but we get volunteers to help us. And we might have to do it every year or two, and it's a low-cost alternative.
Sounds fine.
Is that
You need to-
something that we would need to put on the agenda then to discuss whether we want to involve volunteers or whether we want to set some schedule, or is it just something that
Public
Public
Works
Works
can
can
just take
deal
it
with?
from
Right.
I think here's how I'd say it. Absent any further direction, we'll move ahead and paint it as needed and use volunteers to help us if possible.
Perfect.
Sounds good.
Thanks for the report.
Okay. Item 4, request from letter requesting traffic study or reduction in speed limit on Stang Road from Harrison Road to Western Road.
This is one you might want to refer to the traffic engineer to place in his program of work if you'd like to see a traffic study on this. I can't tell you it'll be done in the next 2 weeks, but you could refer it to us if you'd like.
When was the last time a traffic study was done in this area?
I really don't know.
Well, they've
Staying
just
25th Street.
extended.
This is farther north, I think.
This is north of.
This is up by Bloomington
This is in
Road.
Bloomington. Or
Harrison,
in
Harrison,
Northridge Heights.
yes.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. I move that we direct this to staff for their work plan.
Oh,
Your second?
do you mean a memo from traffic?
No, to move forward and put this on their,
You want them to lower
Oh.
the speed limit?
No,
just
no, no.
without doing- Oh.
do a traffic study.
Oh.
The letter
Thank
asked
you.
for us
I
to
thought you
the
meant
speed
the
limit.
yeah, I thought you meant just the.
Let's get clarity on that.
Yeah, so I'll withdraw the motion and move that we ask staff to conduct a traffic study in the areas described in the letter.
Second.
All right. Those in favor, say aye.
Hold
Aye.
on. I do have a question, just because I live in this area. So it actually changes to 35 in Somerset, and then it proceeds 35 all the way till Stang ends at a dead end. So I'm not sure why we would just be studying this section from Harrison to Weston. That
By the
it's
park.
like 2 blocks. That makes no sense. It's actually 35 from, I believe, Clayton in Somerset all the way to Weston. So
You can adjust that if you'd like.
So I think Amber makes a good point. if I ask the staff to conduct a traffic study in an area that they think would warrant a study given the changes in traffic patterns, is that broad enough or too specific?
Could we just say in the 35-mile-per-hour zone on Stang?
Yeah, there you go.
Would that be?
What would you think?
What do you think, Bloomington North?
I think that's fine. It just
How about
wouldn't-
Bloomington
it
North?
doesn't make sense to take 2 blocks, and
How about Bloomington North?
it's still weird though because it switches to 35 in Somerset. You hit the stoplight, and then 35 miles per hour continues all the way through Northridge Heights.
Okay,
So
24th?
it just doesn't make sense.
24th North?
No.
because you got, I mean,
You said,
It switches in the middle of Somerset.
So to say the
So
35.
just say it's in the
Maybe past
35 mile per hour
There you
zone
go.
on Stang. Is sufficient.
Perfect.
well, that might go,
I'm
how
gonna
far
withdraw my
south does that
motion.
go?
You're up.
I'm not sure how far it goes.
It starts at Clayton,
The 35-mile-an-hour zone, I'm
Yeah.
just not sure.
north of Wallabies. Yeah. And then it goes to till
Yeah,
it's
you're
Stang
right.
or till it ends in Northridge Heights.
it's 25 miles an hour in the business area. and also
Right.
south down to 24.
Right.
You move it, Amber.
So
Do it. He withdrew his motion.
You're on.
okay, so I would move that we ask
I withdrew.
the traffic engineer
Right twice.
to do a traffic study of the area on Stang that's in the 35 mile per hour range.
Is there a
Second.
Or move second?
So we do need to clarify that this is north of Somerset because 35-mile-an-hour is also past Vinker
That's
and
what
all
I'm
of that. So, and it's on Stang.
Yeah. So that
So-
starts in Somerset. It's not north of Somerset. It starts.
Well, it's north
in
of the
Somerset.
business
Yeah.
district of Somerset.
So that's fine. Yeah.
So the motion's been amended north of Somerset.
Yes.
I mean, north.
North of the,
North in Somerset.
north of the business district.
Taylor Glen. It starts at Taylor Glen.
Are we clear on the motion? Are
Crystal,
you clear on it?
Crystal.
Okay.
No,
No.
it would be the area north of Aspen in Somerset.
All the way north to the
All the
north
way till
and-
Stang ends
Till Stang
in
ends.
Northridge Heights.
Okay. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining? Carried.
We did it.
Thank you, Amber.
You have a
Sure.
letter from a student interested in amending a city ordinance to allow vehicles in front yards. You have a copy of the letter.
So I received this letter. I don't think anybody else did, but I'm not sure about that.
I got it.
I think everybody did.
What's in the non-agenda packet in that sense?
Right. No, but I mean,
Initially.
initially it came to me and so I put it in the non-agenda packet so we could all consider it.
I would move that we write a letter to the requester thanking him for the letter, but advising that council will take no action. on this.
Second.
Okay. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion, or anyone opposed? Carried. Council, I would like to go back up to just Gloria raised a point on number 2 is there was nothing in the motion about the permit in terms of the request about doing a 25% down payment. Could you just give me direction in that letter denying the request for a variance that it also included that there's not going to be allowing 25% down? That I think that also there's no precedent for that, but
Is that the question they wanted? I forgot it in front of me.
they wanted to do 25% down.
Until when?
They-
They
I
said?
thought we
Put
were
that-
moving on no action
No
on both
action,
of the
both.
things.
On both
It
of them?
includes both. Yeah.
Okay, very good. I'll make sure, because I don't want to misstate when I write the letter. So, thank you. All right. Okay, council comments. Devin, give you a chance to talk.
I have nothing. So it's all right though.
All right, very good. Gloria?
Nothing tonight.
Sam?
Nothing.
Rachel?
So we've talked a little bit about how the inclusive crosswalk could potentially expand to Campus Town in the future. That would be something I would be interested in talking about in the future as we start talking about maintaining the crosswalk in downtown with volunteers and the paint and that sort of thing.
So we have a motion to do.
Well,
on
Right.
top of it.
Yeah.
We have to.
Mhm.
You talking about Welch and maybe Chamberlain?
Yeah.
Anything else?
Nope.
Amber?
Nothing for me?
I'm wondering, when will we discuss how we want to approach doing a climate action plan? We've got the funding sort of is in the process now, but we're going to have to decide how to do this. Are we going to form a committee? Are we going to invite people? Is the council going to be the executive committee for it, kind of like we are with the comprehensive plan? So is there a plan for this, or should we be thinking about this and maybe put it on the agenda at some point, or any ideas?
Well, you have some direction in that. Normally, we would go out and take proposals from a consulting firms with ideas you give us, like it's important to have public input. Okay, so then they would be evaluated on how they were going to handle that, or any other issues you might have, how you're going to reach out and get as much diverse, feedback as you can. I think you should decide whether you want to be, like land use policy plan, the one involved with, or turn it over to a separate group who's just going to come back and with a recommendation. It's a pretty important project, just like the land use policy plan. You probably don't want to do this, but I think you should probably be involved as a council. It's going to have immense impact on everything we do. So you may think differently, but that doesn't mean there won't be plenty of opportunity for public input from different groups. Well, I know that's very important to the city council and everything we do. But if there are certain things you give us direction on, then we incorporate that into the request for proposal, then we evaluate it.
I think that answers my question. Basically sounds like when the RFP is coming to us for approval, and then that's when we should take up.
But if there are elements like that, I'd like to know up front so I can include it in the draft RFP that you see it.
I think you stated it well. I think we want a lot of public input somehow. We want to figure out how to maximize that and to make sure that we are kind of on the same page about what to do. So
it takes a lot of your time, but I feel more comfortable. Can you imagine if this land use policy plan, if you weren't dealing with this land use policy plan, it just came to you right now, and all of a sudden everybody was going to the north, and you'd say, whoa, this is not right. So it's good that the policymakers get involved in this. I know it's asking you to do a lot, but it's that important of a document, because you're going to be the ones who are going to make sure this gets implemented. So it's got to be something you really believe in. It's that passion again that I talk about to make sure it happens. So I think the consultant's got to work with you to develop that.
But so we can just wait till then in order to do that. That sounds good. Thank you.
Yep.
I have nothing else.
Nothing for me tonight?
So
Right.
I have a question. I just realized as I was sitting here that we never talked about the city managers, the council employees' salaries during our budget discussion. What happened to that? I know we're not doing it, but did we make a motion to
we
table
are.
it?
We're gonna, they
No.
they doing a review. and
We've already sent out, Bronwyn and I, the self-evaluations to the city manager and city attorney, and then we'll send out to the council. And then we give a recommendation to Dwayne, and then we vote on that for.
So we didn't actually need to take action on that, even though that was listed as
Right.
item
So
A on our,
Last year, we did the same thing. It was actually done after we went through this process.
right.
There are placeholders in the budget. Right?
Mhm,
That's-
yes.
that's-
Okay, I just didn't know if we
Optimistic
needed a
placeholders.
specific
That's
motion,
okay.
because it was on the initial sheet we received, and then it was not
Yes.
on
It's
the
a
one we
pot of
got
money
today.
that's filled out. And
Okay,
Mark put in 20%. for
I'm-
If
it.
the evals turn out poorly, we're going to be funding something else.
I'm okay, I'm okay
There
with
goes that
the
artist
process. Just didn't want to miss the chance.
Thank you for asking.
case.
Thank you. All right. I have nothing tonight. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
We are adjourned. Thank you.